Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. I appreciate your time, and very excited that Than, Dr. Hitt, could be here to share some of his knowledge on this presentation tonight. We're going to be speaking about science and community leadership and ways to improve security in Fallon and beyond. I want to give a little bit of background on Than. He is a 10th generation West Virginian and freshwater biologist with expertise in water quality, climate change, and open science strategies. He received his BA from the College of Worcester, Massachusetts, from
Ohio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Worcester, it's okay.
We'll edit that out. A Master's of Science from the University of Montana, PhD from Virginia Tech. From 2009 to 2024, he served as a research biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Kearneysville, West Virginia. He currently serves as senior scientist at the West Virginia Rivers Coalition. And with that, I'm going to hand it over.
All right, thanks, y'all. So we're going to keep it real informal, just keep it conversational. Now, what I want to try to avoid is death by PowerPoint, but I do have some slides, okay? And so I'm just going to wander around and talk about some stuff. And I hope the goal for today is to pepper some tools, some resources, some ideas that are going to help you. But I'm going to start with the finish line, the end point. The number one point is that local leadership and community engagement is obviously where it's at. You need tools, you need resources. But you guys know that already. I'm going to reinforce that a couple times, but I think the action is here. You know, it's not in DC, it even is not Charleston when we have legislative sessions ongoing, it's right here. So kudos to y'all for that. All right, let's step out, zoom out a little bit. That's pretty good, zoom out. So here's something I've experienced, is that water resources bring us together. And let's face it, right now, I mean, it's obvious. We're so divided in ways that we shouldn't be divided. You know, it's like we're neighbors, disagreements, left, right, red, blue, all that's just noise. Water resources bring us together. We're all in it together. We're all drinking from the same cup. Got to remember that. And I think that's more important now than ever, okay? So that's my motivation for today. Yeah. So here are a couple things we're going to talk about. Ecosystems or infrastructure, right? Knowing something about these ecosystems is important because it basically is water infrastructure. So let's get some basics on that, talk about our place and context in the state. Public health and clean water, reinforce and keep topics there. And then we'll talk about tools and local leadership, all right? So some background on me, you know, Frank went over it, backtracking, USGS, Virginia Tech, Montana, I worked at Buckeye Forest Council in Athens for a little while, showed me some of the nonprofit world after the College of Worcester, okay? And I do electrofishing and stream quality stuff. I've done all sorts of water resources research across the state, and so I feel real blessed about that. All right. I do modeling and simulation stuff where there will be no quiz or test at the end of this, but I build statistical models. It's one of the things we do really well. We can talk about that. But here's a framework that I think makes some sense, right? When I think about these issues, and when we talk about water security, what are we talking about? Well, there's one way to frame it. You know, in the work of West Virginia Rivers Coalition involves several different pieces of it, right? Public lands, public health, and wildlife, and in the center of that, you got water security. Water security. You know, what do we mean by that? Go ahead. Well, water quality, water quantity. Basically, do you have the water where you need it, when you need it, and is it usable? Is it safe? That's one obvious framework, okay? Another thing is justice, equity, clean water for all. And this is what I'm talking about, that we're all drinking from the same cup. This is so important right now. Not just the rich folks deserve clean water, everybody deserves clean water, okay? Okay? And then this idea of ecosystems as infrastructure, right? This is why we call this, you know, ecosystem services. We can talk about it in different ways, but understanding these ecosystems is essential for us to understand, do we have safe water? And so that's the background that we'll talk about today. All right. I threw this in here because this was one of the studies that I did, you know, like I guess now, 12 years ago, that got me thinking about things in a new way. That got me thinking about the connections between rivers, streams, water quality, and public health. So I published this paper with Mike Hendricks at WVU, and you can see here in the title, Ecological Integrity of Streams Related to Human Cancer Mortality Rates, okay? And so, you know, this work stemmed from some of the work I was doing running around southern West Virginia, the Guyandotte and other Gauley, other river systems out here, looking downstream of mountaintop removal, valley fills. I was looking at the chemicals, the physical effects, looking at downstream water quality impacts, okay? And one of the things we started seeing was, you know, selenium contamination. This is a fish showing selenium deformities, and what's happening there, it's interesting, at the molecular level, sulfur and selenium are very similar. They're lined up in the periodic table, so they have very similar properties, but they're just different enough that when fish are ingesting selenium diets, I mean, selenium's an essential micronutrient. There's a little tangent here, by the way. It's an essential, you have to have it, or you die, but too much of it is toxic. And so for wildlife, what happens is it substitutes for sulfur in these, they're called tertiary proteins, basically how proteins fold over, you know, and then they do things because they're folded in a certain way. If you have selenium in there instead of sulfur, it just shifts it a little bit. And if you do that enough times, all of a sudden you get these deformities. I'm surprised this individual fish is a creek chub. I'm surprised that survived to an adult age, right? But that's the kind of thing you see. And okay, well that's wildlife, but what about people? You know, what about other animals out here, right? Go ahead. So I did some work with Mike Hendricks on this. The map on the left, these are all the sample sites where DEP has biological data, benthic macroinvertebrate data, the bugs that live in the stream, right? Tons of data. And I wanted to know what predictive power the quality of the life in the streams had to explain this. This is a map, it's a simplified map of cancer mortality rates that are adjusted per 100,000 people in the state of West Virginia. So what you see is a dark color, the more cancer mortality. I got to notice it's you know, you see this big southern West Virginia cluster, okay? But it's not that simple. You also got, you know, Berkeley County, got Ohio County, it's not quite as simple as that, right? But there is this obvious cluster. But this got me thinking about it. What is the connection between environmental quality and public health? In this study was about cancer. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Oh, no.
No worries.
Well,
Getting started.
we can catch that when afterwards.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And also, I should say that there's a sign-up thing for West. If you want more info on West Virginia rivers, there's a little sign-up thing. If you're not already on the mailing list, don't worry, it won't be spam, pure spam. Maybe a little bit. No, it's not bad. It's not bad. And then grab a sticker and stuff. All that. But every water bottle needs a good sticker on it, right?
Yeah, as long as it has pretty sticker.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. So what we learned from this is that, you know, this streams, the life in the streams can predict cancer mortality rates in West Virginia, and it goes above and beyond the other risk factors. Well, we know what causes cancer: smoking, you know, income is related to it, access to physicians, right? All these socioeconomic predictors, that's all super important. But on top of that, that goes above and beyond that stuff, environmental quality of streams and rivers. Okay, it's not that, you know, the stuff that's killing the bugs is the same stuff that's killing the people, but we're saying this comes in a package. And so there's a predictive power to that. So this really opened my mind to thinking about, like, okay, what's the deal? West Virginia, how is environmental quality related to people, public health, cancer mortality rates? This is the real stuff, right? So here's the first concept: ecosystems are infrastructure. I'll tell two basic stories here, one from the eastern part of the state, one from this neck of the woods, okay? So, you know, big picture is this, something we already know, right? Forests are clean water. These are engines of clean water. Millions of people downstream benefit from West Virginia's forest, you know, exported water. So yay, forests, that's the first thing. We also know that, look, hey, no amount of forest cover can prevent extreme weather, right? This is Charleston last year.
That's Lagley Field, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's rough.
That sounds like, wow.
That's rough, yeah. I mean, there's a canal. And then this was this year, Williamson, yeah? Now, it's not only the high side of things that we're seeing in West Virginia over the last couple of months, it's also the low side. So the extreme weather's cutting both ways out here. Blackwater Falls last year, here's a story from Richwood. They had about a week's worth of water left in the reservoir, okay? They take water from South Fork Cherry. I think it's South Fork Cherry, one of the cherry branches. That was too low to take water. They had a backup reservoir, and that was running out. that get your attention, right? That gets your attention. I believe Follansbee's water is a groundwater supply, which we're going to get into, but communities across the state are trying, they need to know, right? This is why it matters, because ecosystems are infrastructure that provides our safe water. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and actually, I think it was some high schools from the river directly.
Oh, yeah?
Some of it's well water, with the 3 wells, I think it was.
I think they went where they were gonna do it with the new water project, the new upcoming water project that's been in progress for 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
From what I recall, they were pulling it both places, and
Okay.
there was talk about just getting it from the river.
Sorry,
Interesting.
Dan.
No, that's
We
that's
have an
good.
active spring at the end of Allegheny. Does anybody go to that this spring?
So what we could actually do in a little bit is pull up I'm gonna end with some tools, and I would love it if you all could pull this stuff up in real time and we can find out what's reported and does it match your reality.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Because you guys have, reality is what you
Yeah.
But there are tools out there that say groundwater source. So let's see if that's accurate or how that tracks with your understanding. So that'd be something good to do. But look, it's not just municipal water suppliers. The agricultural community was sweating it, okay, for obvious reasons. Most of our ag out here is rainfall dependent. It's not irrigated, especially in the eastern part of the state. So it's very much dependent on rainfall. Okay. It's okay. Now we got one tool you can use. This is the U.S. Drought Monitor, but just to show you, this is extreme drought conditions. We saw this. This is 2024. That was before Helene, by the way, and then after, still drought conditions after how much water? I mean, look, something like, what was it? 20 inches of rain fell on Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, and there's no amount of forest cover that can protect downstream communities from that much rain. It's insane. Mount Mitchell's one of the most forested and tagged watersheds. So I'm just saying, forests, yes, they do their job, and we need more. But extreme weather creates risks downstream that we can't ignore, despite best forests. And that's Asheville. But like right now, southern West Virginia is still in emergency flood recovery mode, and only a subset of those counties have been recognized federally, even though we, as a state, asked for more support. So that's one to watch. All right. So you heard the 2 stories. Now, eastern part, karst. Western part, alluvial aquifer. And I'm talking about, Ohio River Valley here. So let's tell the karst story first. Okay. Different colors here, but don't worry about those distinctions. Eastern part, karst. Go ahead. So the story about karst is about, I love this stuff because this is like ancient seabed material. This is an ancient story. It's limestone, right? Limestone, dolostone. It's basically just shell material, compacted for millions of years, and it has certain chemical properties which are relevant today because that's how water moves through this stuff. Okay, so this is when think about all Earth's history. What about a spiral? 4.6 billion years ago here, 350 million years ago is when the karst of West Virginia formed. It was a giant, shallow seabed. And the craziest thing on top of that is the edge of that seabed had a different chemical property. It grabbed magnesium out of the seawater because there was an algal mat around the rim of this ancient sea, and that grabbed magnesium and created different kinds of rocks. So as you're walking through a farm field right now in eastern West Virginia, and you see, limestone, dolostone, you can recreate the ancient history of that shallow sea. And it has different crystalline properties, so it shatters in different ways, which is relevant because that's how water moves through this stuff. It just blows my mind. That's a story of 350 million years ago, and it's still like contemporarily relevant for water. Okay, next one. And this is when a measly 230 million years ago, because these were all flat beds, right? If it was just the same as it was, it'd be lying flat like this. But what happened, of course, is that we ran into Africa. I mean, which is sort of rude. I don't know. I'm sure DEP wasn't issuing permits for that one. Run into Africa, everything gets folded, faulted, twisted up. That's why you see these ridges running the way that they do. Those are cracked, it's basically flat plains, bedding plains that got cracked on their side. And that's why you'll see those long linear features pretty much from north to south in the eastern part of the state. Okay, so here we are now. So we're talking about stuff that's hundreds of millions of years old, but it still has relevance today for water. Okay, partly because all these sinkholes, right? Water moves directly into these. If you look at a map of karst, you find that there aren't many streams on it. It's basically all underground. That's where all the action is. It's all in the groundwater. So you'll look at a map and it's like, where are the streams? Well, they're in these sinkholes, so water is moving in. Okay? And you cut it open, this is kind of what it looks like. It's caves. In the far eastern part of the state, like Berkeley County, Jefferson County, it's more of what we call fracture flow. So it's a bunch of smaller rocks, generally speaking, more like fractured rock. Think of it like a bucket of gravel. In the Greenbrier County area, it's more cave flow. So we call that conduit flow. So it's water moves in general through larger pipe systems. Okay, so these have trade-offs. Okay, but here's the analogy. When you think about groundwater and karst systems, think about your blood vessel system, vascular system. It's not so much that if you cut yourself on the hand, it matters whether you hit a vein or an artery or not. Same thing goes if you're drilling a well. Same thing goes when you're injecting carbon dioxide in the ground. Class 6 injection wells. All those principles apply. That's especially true in karst. Now we're going to get to this neck of the woods here in a minute. Okay. But one cool thing to know is that, since we did some work with USGS on this, is that karst has a benefit for climate change. I mean, it can actually prevent streams from warming it as much. That black line these are different places, and the black line is water temperature, and the gray line is air temperature over a summer. And what you can see, next slide, is that the streams that lack karst, the water temperature and the air temperature track each other real close. But in the streams where karst is present, it doesn't really track as much. So that's like a resiliency. And in fact, these streams where that limestone is present, they might be some of the last cold places in West Virginia. That's weird, but right now, you get up to this, top of the state, Highlands, Spruce Knob, Seneca Rocks. Those are colder streams because their air temperature is colder. And therefore the water temperature is colder, but the air temperature and water, it's more tightly linked, so that as air temperature continues to warm, and we do see evidence for that in West Virginia over the last, several decades, those might be tracking that air temperature, whereas streams that are groundwater fed, that are in the eastern panhandle, lower elevation, even though the air temperature is hotter, they might actually be cooler. So just wrap your mind around that. Those might be the last cold streams in West Virginia, because that groundwater signal. Okay. Another last point on the karst world. Water moves all over the place. It can move this is a map of Jefferson County. Don't worry about the details here, but basically, that's like an 8-mile distance. So when dye was dripped into a sinkhole here, USGS did this work in the 90s. And they asked, where does it pop out? One of the places it popped out was this, Spring House, which serves as the headwaters for the drinking water, part of the drinking water source for Shepherdstown, where I live. So, when we draw a watershed boundary around that little spring head, it doesn't really capture the reality of it. When we think about source water protection, you got to zoom way out. You got to zoom out, and unfortunately, it makes life harder for us, right? Because now it's not your just local catchment, your watershed that matters. It's everything down here, and this is Clark County, Virginia, right? So it gets complicated, but that is reality. So we got to deal with it. All right. So now let's turn over to this neck of the woods. The interesting part to me is that some of the same physical properties, ecosystems are infrastructure, right? We see some of the same stuff in the alluvial river systems, the alluvial aquifer. So alluvial basically is just a reference to deposited sediment and rock material with a natural process of erosion that creates, essentially pore spaces and rocks through which water moves. So that's the jargon for alluvial aquifer. So when we look at this of the Ohio, obviously water's moving in this direction, but that's only part of the story. There's a much larger river flow under the ground where water's moving in the same direction. And it's hard to see from the surface, but when you stick a well into a location, for example, right here, you're actually drinking river water, even though it's not in the river itself. It depends on that depth, right? So one more slide. And here's a way to look at this. This is a cool paper written a couple years ago in Hydrogeology Journal from a study just downstream from here, not far. Look at the Ohio, and what you started to see is that, okay, so So this is like the river level at different points. What was interesting is that the level of water and presumably the quality of water in these drinking water wells, even though they're off the river, they were very much influenced by the level of that river because water's connected, water's flowing back and forth. So when we think about, okay, is this well, are we pulling from groundwater or are we pulling from river water? Sometimes it's the same deal. Yeah.
Can I get a picture of you with that chart for the newspaper?
Sure. Which chart?
Well, right there, the one that you have out this far.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So.
It was so like,
Yeah. Deer in the headlights. Okay. All right, next slide. So here, this is just more detail on this study, but here, drop to the next one. So you probably know these areas, you know, Hannibal Pool, downstream, New Martinsville area. Basically what they saw is that even though the river's over here, the wells that were dug, they interacted with the river level. And so river managers, you know, as you regulate flow in these rivers, you actually regulate the flow and the water level in these wells, okay? So that's, when we think about water security, that's what we're dealing with. It's usually not one or the other, it's usually both, which is a blessing and a curse, right? But that's reality. All right, here we go. Public health requires clean water. Next slide. Duh. So this is something we all know. We all know this. I remind them, I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, we know this, but I mean, look, this is like biology 101, right? Waterborne diseases are lethal. We know this. One of the oldest problems of humanity is to clean up our waste. We know this. We know that water is the secret to success or failure. But we have contemporary problems that are new challenges, and we also like think of new opportunities to improve things. But yeah, certainly new challenges. There's a ton that we could talk about. In the interest of time, I wanted to focus on just a couple of things, and then we can get into a discussion of like what's cooking here. Maybe we could use some of the tools I'll show you to dig in a little deeper. But just a couple of basics. Let's talk about PFAS, the forever chemicals. Obviously, this is a issue of concern. It's an emerging. Our understanding of this is emerging, but we do know some things with confidence, with high confidence, about PFAS, the forever chemicals. And I like this slide because it kind of there's evidence from the public health research that there are impacts in many different body systems of this stuff, right? And actually, there was a recent paper that came out that showed that the blood-brain barrier was permeated, or whatever you call it. Like, this stuff moves through the blood-brain barrier, and we don't know what the impacts of that could be. But here's one way to think about what this stuff actually does. So the compounds that we're looking at, you know, fluorine on a long chain, it kind of looks like a saturated fat in a way. If you think about like what, you know, you have like saturated fats and unsaturated fats, different oils. They also have that same structure, that long chain. And the more hydrocarbons you put on there, the more hydrogens you put on there, the more saturated they become. But that's kind of what these PFAS chemicals do physiologically to us. They simulate fats or lipids or something, you know, whatever you're going to call it. And so anything that a fat does in your body, you know, it does great stuff, like its cell membranes, you know, regulates movement of blood-brain barriers and the transmission of chemicals through those barriers. It's essential for all sorts of physiological processes. All that stuff is essential for growth, development, especially in utero. All that stuff can be influenced by the PFAS forever chemicals, okay? So that's a way to think about it. Anything a fat does, this can mess with it. Okay, next slide. So immune response, thyroid function, lipid insulin regulation, liver and disease, and cancer. I should mention the cancer part. Cancer, evidence for the carcinogenicity, cancer-causing properties of PFAS chemicals, that comes from work with the World Health Organization. It's interesting right now because EPA, and now there are changes in EPA leadership, but what we know is that the World Health Organization, sort of the world's best scientific minds on this, have high confidence that many of the long, especially the long chain PFAS, are directly causing various forms of cancer in people. High confidence about that. And so, we look to the world scientific authorities on this. That's the World Health Organization, and that's what we can be confident, unfortunately, in that signal. Okay, next thing. Another one to highlight, and this is a slide from our European colleagues. There are several things that have been demonstrated, but lower infant birth weights. Okay, that's relevant here, unfortunately, because we're starting out with not a great position on this. Let's face it, West Virginia has not. We have challenges. Okay, we are already one of the states with the highest rate of low birth weight. So it's going to flip, but the darker the red, the lower the birth weight in kids. And there are a lot of things that can contribute to this. And I'm not going to say that this causes that, but I'm just saying that we're starting out from a position of we got to be careful. So anything that's going to jeopardize that further, maybe not a good idea, right? So just something to keep in mind. All right. So what do we know about PFAS in West Virginia? There's been some good work on this. My colleagues at USGS did we've done two different things.
I can't see that, I was looking for a legend.
Yeah, well, it's basically, I'll just explain as we go through.
Purple
There's,
means what, and blue means what?
the purple was where it was detected, blue was where it was not detected in raw water. But there's two different studies I want to tell you about. One is what we call the raw water study, and the other was the finished water study. So the finished water is like out of the tap, post-treatment, right? Like you're gonna drink it. Raw water is the source water coming into these systems. This was the raw water side. But there's, what we really care about, we care about both, right? But it's really the finished water that where people are being exposed to the stuff, right? Treatment can work. So, but this is more lay of the land. Okay, so this is a little bit deceptive because it doesn't tell us about concentrations, right? So next slide. When we look at concentration data, we do see two big hotspots, places where the concentrations are above and beyond. It's a statewide issue. Like, let's acknowledge that. I mean, there's like 700,000 people estimated, 700,000 people in West Virginia that are exposed to PFAS contaminated water. That's 700,000 too many. But I mean, it's a challenge everywhere. We can talk about maybe some of the sources and reasons why we see statewide contamination. It's not simple, obviously, but when we look at where the high concentrations are that are really the public health threats today, Eastern Panhandle and here, alluvial floodplain on the Ohio. All right. Yeah, 700,000. See, I just proved myself right. If it's written down, it has to be true, right? Okay, so this is some text, but just wanted to make sure we're on the same page, just basic concepts. It's obviously, this is stuff that's had value in industrial processing. It makes things waterproof. It makes things slip. It has huge utility in industrial processing, but it's also transported through air and water, resistant decomposition. I mean, there are tons and tons of different types of PFAS chemicals. It's like a soup of stuff. The main way to think about it is long chain and short chain. The long chain stuff is, it's easier to filter that out, which is good because it apparently is more toxic. The short chain stuff though is, there's evidence for the toxicity of short chain PFAS too, which is a challenge because the stuff is small. And the concentrations that we're worried about are really small. But let's talk about some of those. So for example, the EPA's maximum contaminant level for drinking water. We're talking about, okay, what is the national standard for drinking water quality for PFAS chemicals? Now, there's two varieties, two flavors, if you will, of PFAS that have been recognized by EPA out of the 15,000. But these are some big ones. It's appropriate to start with this stuff. PFOA, PFOS, 4 parts per trillion. Parts per trillion. Okay, so what is that? It's 1 drop of PFOA in 5 Olympic swimming pools. So, I mean, that's hard to wrap your mind around, right? That's a minute amount of contaminant for a significant effect. Now, the other thing to note is that EPA puts out, this is what they, This is their maximum contaminant level for drinking water, but this is primarily there because it's feasible to detect it with existing methods. Like, you have to have a reasonable, have a reasonable level that can be evaluated in a laboratory. You can't just make up something, So this is a level where there's detection limits that can be established, and laboratory methods are developed to assess this. But their real goal, what they call their maximum contaminant level goal, is 0. None. So that's just one to keep in mind. So when we start interpreting data from places like Follinsby or wherever, the goal is 0. The legal threshold is 4. And those are different things. Okay. So and by the way, like, I'll follow up with y'all. I got business cards there, whatever. We can stay in touch because I'm going to show you a whole series of different tools, and I don't expect anybody to don't write it down or whatever. I can just send you the link, email you so you can get right on it. But this is one of those tools. This is an important one. This is the finished waters. Okay, so USGS is not the raw water side, but now we're talking about drinking water, post-processed drinking water. Map's a little deceptive, but basically all those clear drops have not been tested, and all the dark blue drops have been tested. That's all that shows. Right? These are all municipal water providers. Where have surveys been conducted? That's really all this shows. All right, go ahead. So when we zoom into this neck of the woods, Follinsby Municipal Water has a sample here, and good news, PFOA. Keep in mind, this is one grab sample. So I'm a data guy. I like to see like many samples, but you work with what you've got, and one is better than none. But just interpret it as it's one sample out of a whole series of conditions. Okay. PFOA below detection limit, great. PFOS 3.18 parts per trillion from that one study. So 3.18 parts per trillion below the legal threshold, but above the goal. So this is a nuanced interpretation. Yeah.
Do you know like what year?
Oh, I should, but I don't. This was probably, it's within the last couple of years.
Oh,
And let me follow up with you actually the year. It's within the last couple of years. Yeah.
I'd like to know that as well.
You know what? And I bet what we could do here is jump onto some of these websites, and you can just Google up a couple keywords, get on there, and actually dig into that.
okay.
Yeah, it's been in the last couple of years. All right. Another web tool that you could use that I like checking out. There's some caveats on how to interpret this one, but this is good. This is the Environmental Working Group's tap water system search tool, and they have a ton of information there for different municipal providers, okay, including Follinsby Municipal. And so interestingly, they show you the data collected in 2018, 2023, but they attribute this to all groundwater. Maybe this is old news, I don't know. Okay, let me show you what they found. So, by the way, this code is a state code, a WV33, blah, blah, blah. It's a state code for the municipal water service. So when you're searching for what is this facility, this municipal water provider, what are the reports, the water quality reports, the history, violations, other aspects, that's the code you want to use. But in this search for the Environmental Working Group's kind of report, they provide some stuff, and it looks pretty scary. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a red flag. But these chemicals that they found, and I believe these were in finished water samples. You'll see, for example, on the top left, 117 times over the Environmental Working Group's health guideline for a carcinogenic compound. Well, that ain't great. Chloroform, 27 times the recommended health guideline. Cancer causing, chloroform, cancer causing, like hardcore carcinogen. That ain't great. And it goes on and it goes on. And there are some other things we could dig into, like some of these nitrite, often those are a product of fertilization or agricultural development. But I want to tell you, interpret these with a grain of salt, because this is not EPA's health advisory. This is a health guideline developed by the Environmental Working Group. So just keep in mind that this is one perspective of those thresholds. Just so don't panic. But I'd say, when you see this, it means that we can do better. That's what it means. Okay. So here's where y'all come in. The work is over. Good luck. No, but for real. So you're talking about councils on advisory councils, citizen advisory councils. That kind of thing has had utility and real impact elsewhere. But you have to have tools, and you have to come to the table with something to offer. It can't just be concern without a basis. You all know that, but let me give you some tools to get there. Okay. One thing to just we step back and look at, some statewide improvements. Like you can see, this is a report. I think this is West Virginia DHHR, Health and Human Services, tracks the number of viable and failing water systems in the state, and we see some decent trends there. Like the failing, so 22, the number of failing systems is going down. Okay, that's good. And the reason that this is happening is local leadership. The cavalry is not coming to save this. It takes advocacy from the local municipalities, county level sometimes, city level sometimes, but that's where the action is. Okay, and here's a case in point. Y'all may have seen this. The West Virginia Water Development Authority has a big bucket of money to fund water development in West Virginia, but they gave millions of dollars, and nothing against Ohio, but they gave millions of dollars to a school in Ohio that has nothing really to do with water security in West Virginia. We have huge needs here, and right now, just go in. Right here, we're sitting in one, and also across, especially the southern part of the state. And what I found is that the advocacy from the township level and the county level, they just don't have the capacity to go after these funds, because everybody's so maxed out with all the other responsibilities they have. They don't have a grant writer. You need a specialist who knows the system and can get in there and can write proposals and can work with the state, and that's a huge lift. And I would love your all's perspective on that, because that's my view from Mingo, Wyoming, McDowell, all these other counties. Why can't we take advantage of the resources we have as a state? West Virginia Water Development Authority, we can do better. And they do good work, don't get me wrong. They do good work. It's just that we have huge needs here, yet, I don't know, you're giving millions of dollars to Ohio schools? Come on. So anyway, local advocacy for that can bring, the resources could be brought to bear. Okay. Another thing to know is that the Clean Water Act has a provision, Section 505 of the Clean Water Act is all about citizen lawsuits. And legal action is not your only tool, but it is a tool. And the Clean Water Act is explicit about this. The Clean Water Act provides an instrument for citizens to hold any agency, organization, or corporation accountable for violations of the Clean Water Act. So there's provisions in there that are important, and that's one tool, maybe not the first one you're going to reach for, but an important one. And we can talk about some of those details later. Another thing on the local leadership level, so I live in Shepherdstown, and that's Jefferson County, but next door neighbor Martinsburg, Berkeley County. There was a success story there. I think it's pretty cool on PFAS. But it was also pretty scary, quite frankly. But okay, next slide. So there is a Eastern Regional Airport. So here we are, Eastern Regional Airport's here, and then for years and years, firefighting foam and training and stuff. They didn't necessarily know that this was contaminant at that time, but they were spraying the stuff. It drops down off the airfield, and this is that thing about karst groundwater. This is all under karst, right? And that when the contaminants, PFAS-loaded chemicals went into the groundwater here, they went to the north. And they contaminated the the springs that serve as Martinsburg's municipal water, and they really hammered those spring sources. CDC came in and did a public health study, and literally was like sampling blood and serum from people within the drinking water public service district, and then people in the same region that were outside that public service district. They weren't drinking the water. And the concentrations in people's bodies were several fold higher if you're drinking that water. There's no other way to really explain that. The air is the same, other things are the same. That's scary. And it was also several fold over the national average for this stuff. So when that result came out, and I don't know why CDC actually stepped up in there. There's probably a story about local leadership there that actually made that happen. But when that happened, what we saw was Senator Manchin, Senator Capito, others that lit a fire under them. And now filtration has been applied. Wasn't cheap or easy, several $million later. But now Martinsburg is drinking clean municipal water. That water, it's filtered correctly. It's below detection limit for all these nasty chemicals. And here's another good thing. If you're treating for PFAS, you often catch a lot of the other stuff. So that's some encouragement for going through all this work. It's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things that you can clean up at once with this kind of investment. But here's another piece of the puzzle though, and this is just one to watch, because like I said, we're all drinking from the same cup, right? So this groundwater source that poisoned that spring, though, as that water is pumped up to the processing station, we can filter it there. But this aquifer other folks are tapping into that same aquifer. And unfortunately, the Martinsburg VA is one of those places. The Veterans Administration Hospital there had, I think, the highest concentration of PFOA, I believe, anywhere in the state. And, it was, something like 8 times above the EPA's drinking water threshold, and that's a shame, because that's like the last thing that vets ought to be dealing with. They got enough to deal with, and now we're giving them like toxic water. That's not right. So that's one that we're going to be working with locals on, and again, it takes local leadership to kind of step up. But the good news is that we have made some progress. 2 legislative cycles ago, passed the PFAS Protection Act, which was a great step. And like I said at first, we're all in this together. If you look at the list of co-sponsors for these bills, it wasn't just one stripe or another. I mean, and this is the only way to get things done, right? You all know this. It was a big tent group that was not interested in partisan politics. It was multi-party and broad-based, and that's what got the goods. So what is happening right now is these community action teams are coming together. And there's probably going to be some news to announce here from the Northern Panhandle real soon about a community action team that will come together to bring some resources on this issue, to find funding to do that work. West Virginia River's in the process of hiring up a local community ambassador, and I wish I knew what the status was, but I don't. So just stay tuned for that. But I know that in the Eastern Panhandle, there's a community ambassador there getting to work, and this is the kind of thing we're going to be working. Yeah. Okay. So tools. We'll go through pretty quick through most of these. There's one real big one that I want to focus on. This is the Environmental Working Group PFAS map. What's interesting to me is this gives you a good regional perspective, but they miss a lot of stuff. When you zoom into Follinsby, there's not a lot of info there, so we can move on. EPA has a great analytical tool. Again, it's great for like, what is the context of my region? If you're interested in like, what is the regional context for my home? Good tool for that. But it lacks data for places that you actually care about. So it's good for regional, not so good for local. Next. But towards the local, understanding local water security. This one, and again, I'll send you all the links and stuff so you can explore. This one is kind of neat. This is the source water protection map. And it's kind of cool. So this is for Follinsby Municipal. That blue is the watershed. And it just reminds us that that water is coming from a huge distance away. I mean, come on. I mean, so it's like, a big chunk of PA, a huge chunk of West Virginia. I mean, it's just a huge thing. And that's the source area. Oh, that's the watershed. The red area there is what they call the zone of critical concern. This is within, I think, oh geez, it's like a 5-hour travel time or something like that. So it's like kind of an emergency management distance. And the green might be like a 10-hour travel time. Okay, next slide. But this allows you to see, so here's our intake, give or take. And so you can think about, okay, where am I on this map? Where is a new project on this map? Is this new project in the red zone? Is it in the green zone? Now, there are other provisions that are relevant for above ground storage tanks. This is one the legislature is considering now. It's also one that emerged in West Virginia after the Elk River disaster, which you remember. But, there are management tools that apply to projects in this zone. So you can use this tool, plop down, what's going on where. You can see this is a big, it's a big chunk of real estate. So this might give you some leverage in community meetings or other kind of, grant applications or other proposals if you're in that zone of critical concern. All right, but this is the real tool that is worth looking at. Have you all used this before? Okay, so some yes, some no. Okay, well, here, let me just do a quick walkthrough, and then, it'd be fun to just get out the phone and see what you can find. Because there are some amazing tools in this thing. So it's called ECHO, stands for the Enforcement and Compliance History Online. It still exists as an EPA website. I have seen EPA websites over the last 3 weeks vanish, just like gone. The environmental justice screen, that doesn't exist anymore. So
So the screen tool's gone.
Screen tool is gone. Doesn't exist.
Oh, wow.
Although they have a somebody mirrored it on another website, so you can get through the back door to see it's been archived. But the screening tool proper is done. And this is the thing that you need when you're writing proposals, you're building, you're like, anyway, I would just say it this way. Don't delay to use this thing. Just like, you might as well use it while we got it, right? But this is a super powerful tool. So next slide. So we enter, the first thing you do is type in your place you care about. All right, so you go to that website, boom, and it's, where are you going? Enter your website. And by the way, it still has an EJ screen component here. I think that'll probably get knocked out. But the main things we're looking for are this. I want to see what are the industrial facilities in a place I care about. I want to see what their compliance history is on Clean Water Act violations standards, right? And I want to see what actions were taken to clean up those violations. And this isn't about blame. It's not, especially for water managers, right? Because these people are heroes, truly. The only blame, if there is any, is that, industrial polluters could filter stuff out that they're not filtering out. Okay, there's some blame there. But for water managers, we built these facilities to basically treat for bacteria. So it's not like it's a surprise that they're not treating for stuff that wasn't designed to treat. And there's no bad blood there, but we can do better, right? If we give people the tools and opportunities. So, all right, here's the Fallensby view, and you can see there's a lot of different projects with information. Next slide. For example, you can click on the municipal water provider. So this is a detailed facility report for City of Fallensby. And then you'll see this table pop up. And there's a ton of stuff here. I'm just going to show you one thread that you can follow, and there are other threads you can follow. So when you look at this table, it's not exactly the most intuitive thing, but this is informative. Okay, next thing. This is what you want to look at. Just to understand what's the history of this facility in clean water. There's a column called single event violations. Okay. And then you can look through time. So here's one period of time, another period of time. And as you go down this table, what you will see is which violations have been issued under the Clean Water Act statutes by this particular facility, and how were they dealt with, right? So, for just this little demonstration, it's like failure to maintain records. Okay, maybe that's not a big concern. However, combined sewer overflow in dry periods of time, that is a significant concern, right? that kind of stuff. And you'll start to see that, and this is such an important tool. This is such an important tool because I'll tell you the truth, West Virginia DEP, so this is the EPA's website, right? West Virginia DEP serves this information up to EPA, and EPA makes it interpretable. I would show you the DEP's permit search tool. It's called APEX, A-P-E-X, but honestly, I don't recommend people even mess with it because it is so convoluted. It is such a difficult tool. I honestly can't recommend people look at it. If you're interested in doing that, I would walk you through it, but it is, I don't know if it's intentional or not, it's very, very poorly designed. But the good news is you don't need it because the same data are here and it's interpretable. Okay, so next thing. And so you can look at another one, and this is another one, of course, of interest locally. You know, right down here, the trimodal. And when you look at that, next slide, same thing on this same 3-year compliance history by quarter. Bum, 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 bum. You can, so we go quarterly non-compliance report history. Here's pollutant X, Y, Z, boom, and then you can go over here and one more time. And then you can start to see some real information. Yeah, so we got PAHs that are being discharged. These are carcinogenic compounds. And when we start seeing numbers like this is, you know, something like 16, well, it's almost 16,000% above the standard. Nearly 20,000% above the standard. This is a concern, right? So, you know, I always think this is the starting point for investigation. This is not, you know, this is where you start, but this is real. These are real data, and those stem from discharge monitoring reports, which are required under the Clean Water Act to the state. The state provides it to the EPA, and now the public gets it, which is a little circuitous. If you ask me, it would be nicer just to post the thing on a bulletin board, but this is what we got. So this is trimodal. And I know there are other things that are cooking out here, and I'd be interested to get your ideas about what's coming down the pike and what kind of monitoring or water quality concerns are associated with that. Okay. And now the final thing I'll show you, this is a really nice tool. You just click through this. If you hit one of those contaminants, it'll give you an effluent chart. So it's just a great visualization. So it goes all the way down with a whole bunch of different chemicals. You can see, all right, red is not good, you know, yellow, warning, blue is good, et cetera, et cetera. Real simple and easy to interpret. This is all in that ECHO database, okay? Another tool I'll let you guys, I'll just put in your, on your radar, and this can be used anytime. This is a really fun one. This is something the West Virginia Rivers developed. It's called the Stream Watch app. It's really good it's a cell phone app, real simple to use, it's free. It's a Survey 123 form, easy to set up. Go ahead. And basically what this is anything that you see that looks wrong in a stream or river. Fish kills, sediment, pollution discharge, weird pipes, don't know what's happening, bizarre effluents. You know, anything that you see.
If you see something, say something.
Exactly. And you know, we all carry these like photo, you know, booths around so we can use them for this. It's a simple app, and basically what you do is you just take a photo of it, take some notes, it'll grab your location, you hit submit, and it comes into my office, and then what I'll do with my crew is we will look at, if it's, for example, well, if it's a fish kill, I mean, we're going to be reporting it to DNR immediately, and we'll try to identify species and help them. But if it's like a pipe discharge or outfall, well, I'll get on the West Virginia AppX tool. That's how much I love you guys. I'll do that work. It's just ridiculous. And I'll try to figure out, is this a permitted discharge? And if it is, I'll report back to you and let you know this is explained and here's the permit, and we can follow up on that. If it's, however, not listed, we report that to DEP with your consent, and we follow up on that. For example, right now, an angler on the Tug Fork, which is really an awesome fishery, by the way, you gotta say, brown trout on the Tug Fork. It's like West Virginia's secret. It's so cool. and it's, you know, it's kind of a river on the resurgent. It's coming back, you know, which is great. But anyway, an angler out there saw a stream, and it's like, this does not look right. It smelled like rotten eggs. There was a white, filmy, bacterial mass everywhere, just covering the substrate. It's like something screwed up. Takes a picture of it, sends it to us. We track it down and report this to DEP, and now they're following up with inspectors, and that's the right. I think that's the right way to do it. Well, you know what this is it's basically an algal, or it's a bacterial mass that consumes sulfur and shoots it up into the atmosphere. That's hydrogen sulfide gas. It's the rotten egg smell. And, you know, that's annoying, but not just that, it's actually a public health hazard at high concentrations. And what we started learning is that in places like Indian Creek, a trip to the Guyandotte, some of these streams are erupting under people's houses, right? So these are mine discharges that are erupting in places that are causing all sorts of havoc. Imagine how you would feel. You wake up one morning and under the foundation of your house, you know, a blowout, and it's rotten egg smell. So, you know, this is the kind of thing.
Lovely.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing we're working on. We got to do better than that. But, you know, again, it's local. In that case too, it's local leadership that actually is going to make progress. So, anyway, that's the Stream Watch app. One more slide. The QR code there. That'll give you all the instructions. It's real simple. Again, I'll follow up, spam you guys with all of these websites. Yeah. Okay. And last one is the Stream Survey Portal. We have this tool where watershed organizations go out. They want to document baseline conditions in streams. This is not so much about water security as much as it is about, you know, stream quality. But there are survey techniques. You can do some training, and then this is a simple online free portal. You can report your data and then look at trends and do some plotting, data analysis, okay? And I think that's basically it, yeah. So contact info and Hitt, Nathaniel, full name, and Hitt at Western New Rivers. So that's the spiel. And I'd love to pick your brain about stuff.